Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, I'm great. We're doing a very special crossover episode, like when I don't know, the cast of Friends was on ER or Punky Brewster was on MASH or something. I don't know, but we're taking the Morning Scoop podcast. We're taking the Buckeye Weekly podcast. We're kind of smushing them together and making one big podcast stew. So it should be fantastic.
What was the Friends crossover with ER? Was that where maybe like Chandler got his hand caught in like the recliner and severely damaged, had nerve damage, and they had to get him to surgery real quick? Now, Tom, why would a New York injury need to be repaired in a Chicago hospital?
Well, Tony, because of network TV branding issues. Maybe they left New York, Tony. I don't remember. It was a long time ago.
You try telling the nurse at the front desk or the receptionist or whomever is running the hospital, yes, it's a network TV thing. Please, we need to be admitted.
I like the fact that Punky Brewster on MASH was not the one you're like, that's ridiculous.
Well, because I probably would have said something insensitive there. I just didn't want to go there. I thought it'd be easier to say something not about war. Okay. So thanks, Tom. Anyway, Tom, we are continuing. I think I'm calling it Tom's definitive list of the 30 greatest Ohio State games of the 21st century, even though, Tom, you have some 2000 games in here, which is, as we know, the 20th century. So is it fair to say that's your list, which we really need to get into, but is it a complete farce when you don't even have the years correct?
Well, I would say I would brand it as the greatest games of the 2000s, which then would make my list correct. Because as we all know, there was no year, when Tony says that, there was no year zero, so the first century was 1 to 100. So the 20th century was 1901 to 2000. But if we brand it as the 2000s, Tony, we just work right around that problem. So no problem at all.
We don't really want to hear your bickering. The morning scoop of the first episode took like over half an hour. So we really need to get into this show. And we are going to go, this show is probably going to be 20 through 11. And I look at 20 and I'm trying to, and I said this on the last show. So Tom's number 20, greatest Ohio State game ever of the last 2000s. Let's brand it that way, Tom.
Mm-hmm.
The 2020 Indiana game. Mm-hmm. Now, as I said on the Morning Scoop, all of these Indiana games run together for me. And this is another one. Like, they all start out with Ohio State going up big and then Indiana coming back late to make it close. But is it really close?
Well, this is one that should not really stand out. It should not really be, indecipherable from all the other ones, because this is the one where we were two of the like 500 people in the stadium. Because this is the one where there were no families and no anything. It was one of the weirdest environments I've ever been in, sports or not. And you had Indiana, having this season that was like, oh, this is, maybe this is the year Indiana gets over the hump, and they had the great Michael Penix play at the end of the Penn State game to win that game, and they're making a run. It's like, oh, this is like a legit Indiana team, and they come into Ohio Stadium, and Ohio State kind of does what Ohio State does and gets a big lead, and they Garrett Wilson had the big touchdown catch in the third quarter, and Ohio State's up by some huge amount, and one of my friends who went to Indiana is texting me like, oh, this was going exactly like I thought it would. And then all of a sudden Indiana wakes up and they come back and they score and they score and they score, and then they have the ball down 7 points in the final couple minutes. And normally you could rely on the crowd to impact the offense and maybe help the defense out. There was no crowd, there was no anything. There were 500 something people there. It was it ended up being one of the most consequential games in the nation that season, because if Indiana comes back and wins, Indiana's going to the Big Ten championship game. Ohio State's out of the college football playoff. So then you have Clemson probably making the national championship game. And this game was what was kind of the key piece to the entire Big Ten season that year, that extremely weird Big Ten season. It ended up a pretty dramatic game. It ended up a pretty consequential game. And because of the setting, it was a pretty memorable game to me as well.
Kind of a Jim Tressel second half for the Ohio State offense. and they scored in with their first drive of the third quarter with the Garrett Wilson touchdown, and then they don't score another offensive touchdown the rest of the game. They have a Sean Wade, I think, pick six in there, and what was a 35-7 lead in the third quarter becomes a 42-35 hold on to your hats type of ending with 635 in attendance for a matchup against number 9 Indiana and number 3 Ohio State. Tom, so this for me, like, I know everybody gave Indiana so much credit for that, but I just like I remember like it was 35-7. Let's not forget that part. Like, Ohio State was so much better than Indiana, and then I think they just shut it down. And Ty Freifogel went crazy, and Michael Penix went crazy, and then you end up having, according to Tom's measurement, the 20th greatest Ohio State game in the history of the 2000s.
Tell me it was not a consequential game. Tell me it was not a dramatic finish. You watch that Ohio State defense. Ty Freifogel had some help from the Ohio State defense, which looked exactly like you remember the Ohio State defense looking, especially the back end of that Ohio State defense looking in the last couple of years. That was it. We talked earlier on the last show about like a very uncomfortable kind of final few minutes for Ohio State fans in the 2012 Indiana game. This was very much the same, except it was maybe even higher stakes because you have the playoff and all that still on the line, and the Big Ten championship still on the line. So, yeah, and that ended up, oddly enough, that we didn't know it at the time, but that ended up being the final home game of the 2020 season for Ohio State too. That was Tony. I'm just going to go out on a limb and just say that was kind of a weird year. So, next one, the 2009 Iowa game, and I think people are not necessarily. This is one that I think gets kind of glossed over a little bit by Ohio State fans. Like, it doesn't, it won't necessarily spring to mind immediately as this was a huge game, but this was a huge game. This was Ohio State and Iowa, number 15 Iowa, number 10 Ohio State. That Ohio State team had just, they had lost a couple of games earlier in the year. They really needed this one. If they won this one, they were going to the Rose Bowl for the first time since the 1996 season. So this was a pretty consequential game from that perspective. And it was a really good game, too. It was Ohio State had a 10-3 lead at halftime. Iowa ties it up. It's 10-10 after three quarters, so it is exactly like a Jim Tressel, Kirk Ferentz game you would expect. And then the fourth quarter just goes nuts. Boom Herron, touchdown. Brandon Sane, 49-yard touchdown. It's 24-10, Ohio State, 11 minutes left. Okay, everything's great. Everything is perfect. Ohio State's going to the Rose Bowl, and they kicked the ball off. And what was it, Johnson Coulianos?
DJ.
The kicker. Yeah.
Daryl Johnson.
Returns a kickoff 99 yards for a touchdown. 2 minutes left in the game. They go right down the field, score another touchdown. 8-play, 70 yards drive. They scored a tying touchdown, 2:42 left. Game goes to overtime. Devin Barclay walks it off with a walk-off field goal. I was down on the field for that one. That was quite a memorable scene. And Ohio State hadn't gone to the Rose Bowl in 13 years. That was a pretty big deal. So, yeah, I think that's one that you might not be thinking of it right away. That might not jump to mind as one of the greatest games, but it was a really consequential and very dramatic and pretty exciting game.
I think, for one, Anderson Russell, 2 interceptions in that game. I think Buckeye fans need to get off his back finally about not having hands. He showed it in that game that he did. Also, I think what a lot of Buckeye fans will remember this game for is Iowa quarterback James Vandenberg's mother, who was pictured in the stands, and she caught the attention of a lot of Buckeye fans. I know, and all of these Buckeye fans were like raving about both the mom and also Vandenberg. But Vandenberg, like, he threw for 233 yards, 20 of 33, 2 touchdowns, but he also threw 3 interceptions. And it was a heroic effort by him, but not enough. And I know you're right, Tom. This was a huge game. The field exploded, like the players just exploded when the kick went through, and that sent them to the Rose Bowl. And for that, that was a big game. I remember that one.
Yeah, that was a very memorable game to be on the field for. I think you can see me on the sideline, like on one of the shots right before the game-winning field goal. You can see me on the sidelines there and on the TV feed. So next one, 2014 Penn State. This was we've talked about the many interchangeable Indiana games and the many interchangeable Wisconsin games. Tony, you're not going to believe it, but it was a game where Ohio State played a Penn State team that was probably not quite as good as it, and still ended up coming to a very, very close, dramatic finish. I know, I'm surprised too. We're gonna hear about Penn State a few more times and later on in this list, but yeah, Ohio State jumps out to a 17-0 lead. They're 6-1. They lost that Virginia Tech game, but okay, everything's fine. They'll be, and then 17-0 lead at halftime, and then interception right after halftime, and then it's still 17-7 after 3 quarters. What could possibly go wrong? Touchdown Penn State, game tying field goal with 9 seconds left for Penn State. Ohio State gets shut out in the second half, and then has to go, and then Penn State scores to start overtime, and Ohio State has to go back down and tie the game in the first half of overtime. Then JT Barrett scores a touchdown to start the second overtime, and then of course the Nick Bosa walk-off sack to end the game. I don't know that I could remember a ton of individual plays from this game. Like if I ask you to picture this game, 99 out of 100 of you are going to remember that Nick Bosa walk-off sack. But this ended up being a very, very consequential game because, again, if Ohio State loses, no national championship that year. So it feels like you could pick like any of about 7 or 8 Ohio State Penn State games from the 2000s and have them on this list. But this one was pretty significant for a couple of reasons.
Yeah, and there are others that are going to be on the list that I think are more memorable. Mm-hmm. But this one, Penn State rushes for 16 yards. Ohio State throws for 74. This was a JT Barrett special where 12 of 19, 2 interceptions, 20 carries for 75 yards. And, Ohio State goes up 17. Then it's tied at the end of regulation, 17-17. And then Ohio State's just like, no, just goes into overtime and scores. And it's like, what? You just scored 2 touchdowns. Like, why weren't you doing any of this before? Like, you had no problem. Like 3 plays and then a touchdown. Penn State was 7 plays in their overtime when they scored. Ohio State's like 3 plays, touchdown. Why is this hard? And that was it was the least of the lot of the Penn State games in my opinion. But it was double overtime, so it's exciting for that. And yeah, Penn State was 1-2 in Big Ten play going into that one, and
Yeah, well, Ohio State here. Speaking of Ohio State average per rush 3.8 yards. Wow, that's not very good. Ohio State yards per pass attempt 3.9. They were below 4 yards per play on both throwing the ball and running the ball. Even yards per completion 6.2. Tell me how many Ohio State fans are watching that game and going, you know what this team's going to do in a couple months? Mm-hmm. Beat the brakes off of Alabama. Absolutely, that's where this is headed. So, yeah, that was one where that was one of the more Jim Tressel wins of the Urban Meyer era. Like, it was just not very good. And you look at some of those early Urban Meyer teams now, and I think some of the more recent Ohio State teams would probably hang a 20-point win over some of those early Urban Meyer teams. But yeah, it was a close, memorable game that ended up having a pretty significant impact on the season on the whole. The next one was one that I had much higher, and then I talked myself into lowering it. And I think you were very disappointed that I did that because you were all ready to jump down my throat and tell me I was an idiot for having this too high. But this was a really, really big game. This was a very, very consequential game. This was 2 teams. This is one of the games you spent all year looking forward to. Number 2, 2009, Southern Cal. Number 3, Southern Cal comes to play on number 8, Ohio State in Ohio Stadium. Really, really close, dramatic game again. Again, this was a Jim Tressel game, and I remember Chris Brown of Smart Football described this as the grisly demise of Tressel Ball. That was the headline of his article recap for this game, and it was like, no lies detected. USC goes right down the field, scores an opening touchdown. Ohio State goes right back down the field, scores a touchdown at 7-7. Ohio State kicks a field goal and to start the second quarter. USC kicks a field goal to end the second quarter, and then Ohio State picks up a safety, kicks a field goal. It's 15-10 Ohio State all the way through the fourth quarter. It's 15-10. New stadium record of 106,033 people there. It was a huge night, really dramatic game. Ohio State had 10 first downs all game, but right at the end of the game, true freshman quarterback Matt Barkley goes right down the field 14 plays, 86 yards, 6:10 off the clock, 18-15 they win. I mean, this was one that the year before USC had completely annihilated Ohio State. It was 35-3 at the Coliseum, and it was not that close if you actually watch that game. This was supposed to be the big statement win for Jim Tressel that we're back. We can play with the big boys. We can beat the big boys. This was one of those games that fed into the importance of that Rose Bowl at the end of the season that we talked about on the Morning Scoop show. But this was a game that was, to me, very memorable, and I think really, really probably sticks out in the memories of a lot of Ohio State fans just because of what was on the line, but also just how the game played out and kind of what it meant for the program in the big picture.
This to me wasn't so much Tressel ball as it was Jim Tressel coaching terrified of USC and whether it's just their overall talent. Let's not forget Pete Carroll had the recruiting, like the recruiting that Alabama is doing now. Pete Carroll was doing back then at Southern Cal, and they had a bunch of talent. Jim Tressel got a firsthand look at it the year before, and I just remember that entire game thinking that Ohio State is just playing scared, being coached scared, plays being called. It was just a whole bunch of fear. And then, showed in the defense in the last drive as well. But, even Ohio State gets the ball back after that touchdown to Joe McKnight, and they've got a minute and 1 second on the clock. And that's never been what Terrell Pryor does well. And this was only his second year. But the first play is intentional grounding, so it sets them up to 2nd and 28 or whatever. And it's from there, it just gets worse. And just an entire game of Ohio State, Jim Tressel mostly, in my opinion, just being terrified of what USC was going to do, never really thinking that his players could do the same. And I think it was maybe an accurate lack of confidence because recruiting kind of dipped a little for Jim Tressel over towards the end of his career. And so I think he was maybe not wrong that he was afraid, but I'd never seen that fear before. There's conservatism in his style, but this was fear to me, and I had never really seen that before because he usually had plenty of talent up front and whatever to handle. There are years where, Troy Smith only throwing for 2,500 yards, Ted Ginn never having 1,000-yard season. This is like Dean Smith holding Michael Jordan to 19 points a game. Jim Tressel held the offensive back just because that was a style. But in this game, I just saw a bunch of fear, and that's why I can't believe when I saw you initially had it number 1 overall, I was shocked.
It wasn't number 1 overall, but it was higher. But it was, this was a really, really consequential game in a lot. It felt like a massive game at the time. And you talk about Tressel coaching scared a little bit in this game. They had the ball 1st and goal at the USC 2 right at the end of the first quarter. The 7-7 game. Pryor throws for Jake Ballard incomplete. Boom Heron runs over left guard for 1 yard down to the 1, 3rd and goal from the 1, runs over left end, no gain, still at the USC 1, and they kick a field goal to start the second quarter instead of going for a touchdown and then potentially pinning a true freshman quarterback that far back down the field. Worst case scenario, you pin Matt Barkley at the 1 in a stadium that is raucous and roaring, and make him do something there. They didn't. They kicked the field goal and ended up coming back to bite him. So number 16 on this list. This is one that this was not a good football game. This was not at all a good football game. But everyone remembers where they were. Tony, I have just 2 words for you: Holy Buckeye.
Yeah, Tom, it's one of those games that everybody loves. Yeah, I love that game so much. It's probably my favorite. I just love it so much. And then if you make somebody, oh really, you love it, do you? Let's sit down and watch this game and see how much you love it. And by the second quarter, you're pinching them. Wake up. No. You're going to watch this. You're going to watch this entire game. And I don't even want to bring up the box score because it's just, I don't want to fall asleep during the show while I'm reading it. It was tremendous ending. And even after the ending, the subsequent interception by Chris Gamble at the end there to secure the win. But other than the first 52 minutes of the game, 55 minutes of the game, the rest is great, but just though that early first 50 minutes or whatever, it's not enjoyable football. It's just really, really, it did not deserve. It deserves to remain in in a standard definition rather than high definition.
Yeah. This was a game that played into a national championship season. Has the memorable call by Brent Musburger. Came down to a dramatic fourth down play under 2 minutes to go, and it's 16th on this list. So think about how bad the first 58 minutes had to be for this to be 16th on this list. It reminds me a little bit of the 1997 Rose Bowl, where everyone remembers Jake Plummer scores a touchdown. Ohio State goes right down the field. David Boston scores a touchdown. This incredible game. It's like, yeah, there was there was like 55 minutes before that were like it was 14-10, and it was not that great a game. So yeah, it was this ended up being a memorable game. I do wonder if this has if Brent Musburger has a less memorable call, if this game is remembered quite as much as it is. That feels like, because the next one we're going to talk about, this is another game very much in that same realm. And I think I put it ahead of this one because of just the atmosphere, because it was a home game instead of a road game. This is the 2002 Penn State game. He didn't have the holy Buckeye type call on the Chris Gamble pick six, but is that one of the reasons that the Purdue game is maybe remembered more than the Penn State game? I don't know, but this Penn State game, it was another. Ohio State is undefeated. They're playing a team that's, the Ohio State number 4, Penn State number 17. Okay, it's a little bit bigger game. And, Penn State jumps out to a 7-0 lead in the first quarter. Ohio State can't do anything on offense again. It's 7-3 at halftime. And then right after halftime, Chris Gamble returns in, the interception for the touchdown. This is another one where Ohio State can't run the ball for 3 yards a carry. Same thing with the Purdue game. Like, they can't run it for 3 yards a carry. This was another one where Maurice Clarett was very limited. He had four carries for 39 yards, had a 30-yard run, but just, he had that shoulder stinger thing going on and couldn't ever stay healthy, couldn't stay on the field. And then, Lydell Ross averaged 1.9 yards per carry. Maurice Hall, 2.5 yards per carry. There was just nothing there. But, Chris Gamble, this was maybe one of the best encapsulations of that team, where it was like, they did just enough to barely get out of there. And, this was an okay Penn State team, but not an incredible Penn State team. And Zach Mills throws 3 picks. Zach Mills' line that day, 14 for 28, 98 yards, no touchdowns, 3 picks. And Ohio State wins 13-7. Yikes. But, I mean, it was a very important game. It was a very dramatic game. It was one of those moments that I think people still talk about as the loudest they've ever heard the horseshoe, is Chris Gamble running that pick six back. Yeah,
that's why I don't have a problem with this being this high, because I was not at this game, but I have talked to people who say this was the loudest they've ever heard it. And I think it's an example of just the excitement, the relief, because I don't know how many people remember just the 2002 season. Every week was like this. And at this point, you're almost waiting for something good to happen, while also knowing like something good can't keep happening. Like, plays, Ohio State made so many plays right when they needed to, and then Chris Gamble does that. And you look at Chris Gamble's line that day. He had one rush for 3 yards, 1 catch for a loss of 1, 5 punt returns for 64 yards, 1 tackle, 1 pass breakup, and a pick six of 40 yards. I mean, like, he would routinely play 100 plays a game, and this was one of those examples of just how insane what Chris Gamble was able to do that season, just how insane he was. And, yeah, not a great game, but I'm with you on having this one above the Holy Buckeye, because I think there's more skill in this game than the Purdue game, and it was on display a little bit more, but neither of these are exactly, I mean.
Yeah, it feels like you take the team names and dates and player names off of the box scores, and I could basically tell you what year the game was from. Like, they're averaging 2 yards per carry, and they've thrown the ball 13 times today. It's like, aha. which trestle special is this? Because it is, ooh boy. If it's it's either a trestle special or it's that 2011 Ohio State team at times. But we're the next one up is this is one where you're not going to confuse this one with a Jim Tressel game. The 2020 season, the Sugar Bowl against Clemson, so the 2021 Sugar Bowl against Clemson. This is one of the first ones that was not a nail biter, but this is another one that was a really consequential game for Ohio State, where you had that season where they looked for all the world like they weren't going to play, and the decision's not going to be revisited, and all yada yada yada, all that stuff. And they fight through all of that. They get to play the season. They have to have the exception made because the Big Ten's rule was written in a stupid way where, if other teams cancel on you, well, too bad, you can't play in the Big Ten championship game. And they ended up getting the rule rewritten. They get to go play Northwestern. They beat Northwestern. They go to the Sugar Bowl. And there sits Clemson, the team they've never beaten, the team that just ruined their season the year before. You may get to hear about that game a little bit later on the next show. Clemson was the team that all year long they were pointing to. That was the mission, was Clemson, because that was the team that had ended their season the year before. They felt like, probably somewhat unjustly, they probably felt like they deserved to win, that they should have won that game, and they probably should have, but they didn't. All year long, this is shaping up to, oh boy, if Ohio State can only get another shot at Clemson. And then they finally do, and it's again in this weird setup. There's 3,000 people there in the Superdome. It's not the usual college football playoff semifinal atmosphere. But Clemson scores a touchdown, Ohio State scores a touchdown, Clemson scores a touchdown. It's like, oh man, this is going to be a shootout. And then all of a sudden, one side ran out of bullets.
Tom, I get the feeling that a lot of people listening to this right now are questioning your intelligence.
What's the reason this time?
I don't know, any number of reasons. I just wanted to say that. No, I think a lot of people are going to want this higher on their list. And I understand why this is a 21-point game. That was a 28-point game in the fourth quarter. So, why do you need it? But as you said, it was the culmination of a year's work. And it really, really showcased all of the work that got put in when you see the results. And Ohio State had over 600 yards of total offense. Justin Fields had This game made Justin Fields an Ohio State legend. 385 yards passing, 6 touchdowns, 1 interception, 42 yards rushing. Certainly was not healthy throughout that game and got knocked out of it and had to come back in. And some really great moments. And it certainly didn't wash away the 2019 game, because that was an Ohio State team that was good enough to win a national championship, and they had that taken away from them by the instant replay reviewers. But this one, I think it made a lot of people happy, and I think a lot of people are going to have this higher on their list just from the feelings of it than necessarily the analytical portion of the score and all of that.
Yeah, and that's totally fair. I mean, this is greatest games, and I'm sure there are a lot of Ohio State fans who would not have a loss on their list at all, and that's totally fair. This is just, I think you have to figure the drama in, and we had a conversation about the 2014 Wisconsin game before the thing. It's like, does that go on this list? Because it was 59-0, so I don't know, does it? And this is one where it looked like, for all the world, like this was going to be an incredible shootout. It was 14-7 Clemson with 5 minutes left in the first quarter. It's like, oh man, here we go. And then Ohio State runs off a 42-7 run against Clemson, against the big bad team that ruined their season the year before. Ohio State outrushes them 5.8 yards per carry to 2. Ohio State outpasses them 13.8 yards per carry to 8.3. Anytime you outrush a team by 3.8 yards and outpass them by 5.5 yards per attempt, you're probably going to win the game, and Ohio State did. That was one where you looked at Trevor Lawrence's numbers at the end of the game, and it was like, he threw for how many yards? He threw for 33 for 48, 400 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 pick, and it was like, when did this happen? Like, what? When? And that was the Justin Fields show, and that was I mean, every time we do these post-game shows, I'm just thinking back. That might be the giddiest I've ever remembered, Ohio State fans being after a game, at least in the last 5 years or so, was that one. That was quite a memorable evening in New Orleans. And, here's another one that I'm sure people will have much higher on their list, except this really wasn't much of a game. Like, this was another one where it was like, the first drive of the game was like, oh boy, here we go. This is going to be, and the game's over. Oregon, you know what this reminds me of? This reminds me a little bit of the 2018 Michigan game. This is the 2014 National Championship game, 2015 College Football Playoff against Oregon. Oregon goes right down the field, scores a touchdown at 7-0. It's like, oh man, Marcus Mariota, here we go. This is going to be an amazing shootout. And then Ohio State just kind of like grinds them into dust. And, they scored a touchdown right at the end of the start of the third quarter to make it 21-17. It was like, oh man, here they come. Now it's going to, and then nope, Ohio State just grinds them into dust again. So it was 21-20 in the middle of the third quarter. But, the fourth quarter, Ohio State just completely dominated. Basically after Oregon cut it to 21-20, like, man, this was going to be an incredible dramatic finish. Nope, it's just going to be Ezekiel Elliott left, Ezekiel Elliott right, Ezekiel Elliott up the middle, 36 carries, 246 yards, 4 touchdowns. It's just, and I remember watching that game, and it was like Ohio State won by 3 touchdowns, and they had a bunch of they had turnovers and just silly stuff. It was like, this was a game that Ohio State very easily could have won by 2 more touchdowns than they did. It just, like, even when they were up by just 1 in the third quarter, that one just never felt in doubt to me at any point.
Yeah, this was one of those where Ohio State was just physically so much more imposing, and they imposed their will and just pushed Oregon around. Ohio State with 4 turnovers, 3 fumbles, 2 of them by Cardale Jones, and then Cardale also threw an interception. It's funny that he's got so many turnovers, but he is still revered for this being the third of his starts in that 2014 season. I don't know that. I think there's a large portion of the fan base, and maybe whoever thinks about this game that doesn't sees Cardale Jones as like, he was the perfect vision of a quarterback, and it's like, no, he wasn't. And he was also running the ball 20, had 21 rushes, although one of those was a sack, and there's some scrambles, and but it was enough. And you had Ezekiel Elliott with 36 carries, and that was, they just kept pounding with him, and I think they moved to some sort of a counter play that Oregon had no answer for, and once they kept doing that and there was no answer, there was that game was over at that point. But Ohio State was going to beat them up regardless, and they did the same thing to Alabama. I don't know if that's up on your list at all, but you just, that was one of those teams with the offensive line and defensive line to do it, and they certainly did. And then also, so many young guys on that team, so many second-year players on that 2014 team, all came into their own in that final quarter of the season, and they were excellent in this one.
And I'm just going to read you the drive charts for these two teams. And that's, I think, going to tell you, kind of give you the sense for what I'm talking about here. Ohio State, here's how their drives ended: punt, touchdown, touchdown, fumble, fumble, touchdown, punt, interception, fumble, touchdown, touchdown, punt, touchdown. Like, they punted on the first drive of the game, and then 2 punts the rest of the way, and 6 touchdowns and 4 turnovers in the middle there. It was just, they just, if they had not turned the ball over, they would maybe have just scored touchdowns every single time. Here's Oregon's touchdown chart, or drive chart: touchdown, punt, 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 downs, punt, and then a field goal right at the end of the half, and then touchdown to start the second half, field goal, then to cut it to 21-20, punt, punt, downs, interception. And it was just, they never got drives going. They had drives of 75 for the opening touchdown, then 35, 11, 10. They had a 58-yard drive that ended on downs, 0, 66 for a field goal, 70 for that touchdown on that one play, 17 for a field goal, 20, 16, -1, 23. Like, you kept getting the ball. They kept getting the ball in good field position and not being able to do anything with it. They just couldn't get anything going. That's why that never felt like they really actually got, they were never really seriously in, Ohio State was never really seriously in danger, even if the scoreboard made it look like they were. Number 12, 2018 Penn State. This is one we covered in person, and you could mix. Sometimes these games ended up crazy. Sometimes, I just realized I left 2016 Penn State off this list. Oh boy, we may have to have 1A, 1B. Oh boy, that one should probably be back a couple spots here. But yeah, these whiteout Penn State games, it's like close, dramatic, end of the game. This one was Ohio State was down 26-14 with 8 minutes left in the game. they're dead. Oh, the whiteout is rocking, and then they come back, and Ben Victor has that long touchdown pass. We've told the story in the podcast before, but we're down in the tunnel because we're out of the press box. We're supposed to be able to go on the field, and they're going to be real strict sticklers about when they let you out on the field. So you're standing down the tunnel, and you just hear the Ohio State fans cheer. Like the Penn State fans go quiet. The Ohio State fans are screaming, and you're waiting, and you're waiting, and you're waiting. Like, what is going on? Is there a streaker on the field? What's happening? And then here comes Ben Victor with the coming into the end zone with the ball. And then KJ Hill scores the winning touchdown. 8 plays, 96 yards on that drive with 2:03 left to pull out a 27-26 win. And then 4th and 5, Tony, pop quiz, hot shot. What do you do? 4th and 5, what do you do?
Do you run a read option and then hand it off?
Smart. Yes. Well done. Well done, sir. You are elite.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I was just looking through this final drive, the last couple of drives where, because I believe I went down because you're already on the field shooting photos, correct? Or were you?
No. No, I was with you.
So we left after the Penn State scores to go up like 26-14 with 6 minutes to go. So that's when we go down there, and then you're just watching it on TV. And then as I've said on the show before, like I could see through the tunnel onto the field. All I could see was Ohio State's end zone. And this is while the Benjamin Victor play is going on. Like I see the refs, the crowd starts yelling. I see the refs back into the end zone, or one of the refs, and then move forward out of my field of vision. And then he comes back in, and the crowd's getting louder and louder and going crazier. And then you see like Benjamin Victor jump into the end zone, and then we all just like run to the TV, like, what just happened? Because how is this possible? And that was a 75-yard drive in 3 plays, and then the next drive was 96 yards. And I think it started with a J.K. Dobbins screen pass that went out, started at the 4, went out to like the 25 or something to give them some room. And then it was just pretty much from there, the Ohio State offense could do whatever they needed. And this was still, that was a 2-minute drive. And that was impressive. And that was a memorable one. I don't know if it's that. Yeah. I mean, as you said, like these Penn State games can sometimes run together, but that was one of those where, I'll always remember where I was when I got to see what little of it I got. And then I think we're on the same, the KJ Hill touchdown was on the opposite side of the field, but we were on that side of the end zone.
We were in that end zone, but on the other side of the field. Yep.
And so that was another one where you can see it happening, and it was, those are always the fun ones when it happens, kind of right in front of you.
All right, and I'm going to throw in a number 11.5 here because we do need to talk about the 2016 Penn State game, which does stand out a little more because Ohio State actually lost that one. Ohio State typically goes to Penn State and ruins it in some dramatic way. This time, Penn State ruined Ohio State's season in a kind of dramatic way. This was a lot like one of the other games we talked about earlier where it's Ohio State's up. It was like the 2014 game. Ohio State's up big in the first half and just like, okay, and now they're just not going to do anything for the rest of the game, and let's see what happens. And in 2014, they got away with it in overtime. This time, they did not get away with it. They were up 12-zip in the right before halftime, and then right before halftime, Penn State goes right down the field. Long touchdown pass from Trace McSorley to Chris Godwin to cut it to 12-7. Ohio State gets the ball back in the third quarter. Curtis Samuel goes 74 yards for a touchdown. It's 19-7. Then they get a safety. It's 21-7. Tony, at this point, I think what you definitely don't want to do is give the ball to the guy who just ran for 74 yards. You don't want to give him the ball anymore at all. Keep him off the field. Only bad things can happen if he gets the ball in his hands again. And then Penn State scores to make it 21-14. And then Penn State scores on kicks a field goal. It's 21-17. And then 4:27 left in the game. It's 21-17. Ohio State's trying to kick a field goal. And Grant Haley scoops up that blocked field goal and runs it back for a touchdown. And Ohio State finishes with a 24-21 loss, cost them the Big Ten championship for the second straight year. Curtis Samuel finishes with 2 carries for 71 yards, 1 touchdown, 35.5 yards per carry. Tony, I got to see more JT Barrett running the QB power. That's my big takeaway on this game.
I'm just looking at the Ohio State's final drive because they got the ball back with 4:21 after the blocked field goal touchdown. So Ohio State then goes on a 10-play drive for 12 yards. It's a 3-minute drive. Ohio State got it at the 11, moved it out to their own 42, but then the consecutive sacks of 13 and 6 yards ended the game there. And that one was one of those games, a rare game where Ohio State, Urban Meyer had a win stolen from him. The other ones that Urban Meyer generally loses, they get blown out or whatever. And this one, this was a shocker because this wasn't a great Penn State team by any means.
No, they were. It was okay, and they went to the Big Ten championship game, beat a just kind of okay Wisconsin team, went to the Rose Bowl, played a USC team that started the year dreadful, then figured out, I'm not sure this dude's our quarterback. Maybe we should try this other guy who's going to be a first-round draft pick in a few months, and played an absolutely classic Rose Bowl. So, yeah, that was a Penn State team that was it was good. They weren't super incredible, but they were good. They kind of figured out what they could do and how to make the best use of their talents, and that was the deep state offense and all that, and that they ended up having a pretty good season. So, yeah, that was peak Trace McSorley that season, when it was just heave the ball up and let someone make a play. All right, and next one, this is that was 11A. This is 11. The 2005 Michigan game. That was, Tony. Who did you think was going to win that game? Sorry, that's a little deep cut. Oh, sorry. I know you've been so kind to me and everything here we do, and I'm sure you'll be super understanding when I add an 11th game to our top 10 show that we're going to do next. It's fine. I'm just looking through this list right now. I was trying to pull up the box score for this, and I was like, I didn't put the 2012 Michigan State 17-16 game on there. That probably should have been on there. I think
you originally had it, but you removed it.
I think I originally had it and took it off, and it just
that's a very important game.
This probably should be a top 40 list, because there are some great games that are not on this list. So, 2005 Michigan, Ohio State. This was, just let's set the scene here. This is, number 9 Ohio State, number 17 Michigan. So this is not a great Michigan team, but this is Ohio State. Jim Tressel has won the first year up in Ann Arbor. Second year, they beat Michigan and win the national championship. Third year, Michigan comes back. They beat Ohio State. It's 2003. They beat them 35-21. And so, okay, order has been restored. 2004, Michigan comes down to Ohio State looking to clinch the outright Big Ten championship. Gets absolutely stomped, and that's another one that probably, I probably should have had on this list, but that was one that was enough of a gap that I didn't put that on this list, but maybe that should be here. But yeah, this one, the 2005 game, this was the one where it was just oh, maybe Jim Tressel just has their number. It was, Michigan has what's his name? Bobby Carpenter breaks his leg very early in the game. They throw James Laurinaitis in. Michigan this was a real Lloyd Carr game. This was the most Lloyd Carr Michigan game that I can remember, probably from that last decade. Just trying to do just enough to win, and you had a veteran quarterback, you had a veteran running back at this point. Michigan has an 18-12 lead after 3 quarters. They go 11 plays, 69 yards. They kick a field goal. Tony. 19-yard field goal. Instead of playing for the win, they kick a field goal to make it a 9-point lead. Okay, it's a 2 possession game. Ohio State comes right down the field. 5 plays, 67 yards. Troy Smith to Santonio Holmes. You are probably right now picturing him diving into the end zone. And then Ohio State gets the ball back, down 2 points. And the famous Anthony Gonzalez catch along the sideline. And then Antonio Pittman runs it in with 24 seconds left. Have we ever gotten an official answer on whether Michigan was letting him score there? Because it looked like they were letting him score, but I don't think they've ever actually said they were letting him score.
I don't think they were, because there's only 24 seconds left.
Right, yeah.
So he definitely ran over Sean Crable, Prescott Burgess.
Yeah, so it was Ohio State ends up winning. 12 plays, 88 yards, 354 time of possession. Troy Smith gets him again. Don't worry, I'm sure it'll work out better for Michigan the next year in Columbus, so it'll be fine. But yeah, that was one. This is another one that I was there for, and it was just, this was another one of those kind of real sea change in the rivalry things, where it was just, is this Tressel guy going to be able to beat them consistently, or is this going to kind of be every other year you kind of, it'll be a battle, and it's nope, he's going to maybe just do this all the time.
Yeah, I think this is another one where people will have it higher than you do, not because you're wrong, But at least with the Lloyd Carr kicking the field goal thing, the reason it's not so bad is because that would have put Michigan just at 25. That would allow Ohio State to kick an extra point to win at 26-25. So you can kind of understand the need, the desire to let's just get the sure points since 2 touchdowns wins it anyway. Although the way Lloyd Carr did it, 1 touchdown and a field goal would have won it for Ohio State, which, it becomes the issue there. But the throw for what was this the Santonio Holmes getting flagged for diving into the end zone?
Yes.
On his 26-yard touchdown in the fourth quarter. And then you've got the touchdown, or the deep pass to Anthony Gonzalez. Troy Smith was a wizard in this game, and he was a wizard many times against Michigan. And it was one of this was one of those games where I think Michigan fans just realized, we can't beat Troy Smith. We can't stop him, and we can barely tackle him. And when we get in there, he can avoid pressure and find somebody. And so this was, yes, Tom, I did predict Michigan to win this game way back when. Everybody knows it. It's very famously one of the worst predictions that anybody has ever made, even though I got almost everything right except for the score. But
Tony, don't worry, Tony. The 2022 Rose Bowl's coming up, so you get to return the favor on the next show.
But this one was a fun game because it was a last minute ending. It was it had everything, and there was enough scoring in there that it wasn't one of these 10-3 classics. It was there was enough going on throughout the entire game to make it exciting, in my opinion.
Yeah, this was one that was, there was a lot going on there. Narratively, there was a lot going on the field. There was, it was back and forth. It was, touchdown, field goal, touchdown, field goal. I mean, the teams are scoring, both teams are scoring in pretty much every quarter at this point. And, there was plenty of action. It was not, there were a lot of field goals, but there was plenty of action, plenty of drives that ended up in the red zone. So, yeah, and it was a competitive, Michigan ran for 1.3 yards per carry. What? How did Lloyd Carr think this was going to work? But yeah, no, that was definitely one that will be one. You can show the Anthony Gonzalez highlight and just show. I mean, if you just show the shadow of him catching the ball and flying horizontally through the air after he's getting shoved, you could just show a still shadow of that, and people will go, "That's the Anthony Gonzalez catch that set up the winning touchdown in the 2005 Michigan game." That's just one of the most iconic moments in Ohio State history. So I think that has to go up here at some point.
Chad Henne, a long rush of 4 yards. Mike Hart, a long rush of 4 yards in that game. I'm guessing that was the only time in their respective careers that they had the same long carry in a game. So that will do it. Now, if you're wondering, hey, this does not reflect my top 30 list of the 20 through 11. This is way off. Don't be alarmed. You're certainly not alone. This is just Tom's, I wouldn't call it Tom's opinion. He has stated this as fact. These are the 30 greatest Ohio State games of the 2000s. And if you have a problem with that, basically you're dumb. And Tom, I believe that is the actual title of how you have listed this, right? And at the end is basically you're dumb.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly how I'm going to brand this, because I'm not. I am definitely dead set on this list, and I'm not changing my mind and going, I probably should have put that one in there. I think what we're going to do is we're going to do episodes 30 through 21, and then 20 through 11, and then 10 through 1, and then we may go back and do 31 to 40, which is we probably should have talked about these games as well, because these were also pretty incredible. And for a team that wins as many games by so many points as Ohio State does, it's amazing how many years. I mean, there's certain years where there was 1 or 2 games here, and then there's 2002 where it's this is literally half the season. Half of the season you could put the games on this list. So yeah, there's some great ones on here that I will absolutely accept your criticism and or feedback on. This one should have been on this list because I probably agree with you in some way.
Yeah, because I don't want to have any spoilers here, but the 2002 Illinois game.
No, yeah, that was on my list of 70 and just didn't make the cut here. But yeah, I mean the 2007, there were the I mean, the South Carolina Outback Bowl that I mentioned on, I think the last show, that one didn't make it. That was a great game. It wasn't a huge high stakes game, but it was a great game. There were some 2003 Penn State, which I think is one of the most underrated games in Ohio State history. Really, really dramatic finish and classic Ohio State Penn State game that fed into all the conspiracy theories. That one didn't make it. The 2004 Marshall game didn't make it. And it was like, these are all games that I had on the list at some point. I was like, well, I guess something's got to move down the list. So I guess we're not going to have it on here. But yeah, it feels, the 2004 Michigan State game. That's another really underrated one that I feel like we could do probably a whole show of just the 10 best Ohio State Michigan State games. And that would be a pretty good show as well.
I think the next show after we get this all wrapped up, we'll just place games like the 13.5. Goes right here. The 22.5 is right here. 22.5A is this one.
I already have I have a 10A or maybe a 6A or so that I've changed my mind on since we've started talking. I was like, well, I guess to be intellectually consistent, I should probably have this one on there as well. So we'll do 10.5 for next time. So that'll be, and you know what? Maybe it'll be 11.5. Maybe it'll be 12 3/4. We'll see. I feel like I'm leaving too many good games off here. Turns out Ohio State plays some interesting football games. Who knew?
Well, I can help you out, Tom. If you just remove the 2021 Michigan game out of the top 5, I think that would help out.
Tony,
I think you got a little high there.
Tony, let's not say something we can't take back.
So that will do it for this episode. If you agree with Tom, great. If you don't agree with him, please let him know. You can let him know via email, Twitter. I'll put his phone number in the show notes here, and you can just let him know at your whim and whimsy. So I want to thank you all for joining us in this show. Thank you for watching. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll talk to you guys later.